Good afternoon, good morning, and welcome back to BoF Live, the second in 2021. My name is Robin Mellery-Pratt, and I'm the Director of Content Strategy at the Business of Fashion. Thank you to all of you for joining us on such a momentous day in the United States, which I think we can all agree represents an opportunity to restart and refresh and reassess our collective future. Today's talk also falls within BoF Careers Week, which is an annual week-long event where we seek to offer our community not only guidance on job market disruption and expert insight and best practices, but to connect them to some live job opportunities and advice on how to secure them. Throughout this talk, we'll be sharing links in the Q&A function of Zoom, directing you to relevant parts of the BoF Careers platform, which hosts over 1,800 jobs and hosted by hundreds of the most prestigious employers in the industry. But to the task at hand, last year, just 7% of companies that responded to a BoF community survey in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic stated that they intended to continue to hire as planned pre-crisis. 93% of the respondents were putting an indeterminate time freeze on hiring, and 33% said that they planned for layoffs. Clearly, in so adverse an economic climate, in 2021, getting a new job in fashion, whether that be your first or next job, will demand tenacity. But the question we're here to ask today is what matters most to employers, and what does excellence look like today in what has become a novel remote recruitment process? I'm delighted to be joined by three experts to answer that question, because I certainly can't. I'm delighted to be joined by the CFDA President CaSandra Diggs. She's in her 20th year at the organization, having most recently served as the CFO, and is charged with developing its strategy and making decisions that further the CFDA's purpose to champion, educate, and support its membership in the fashion industry at large. CaSandra, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Robin. Good morning, good afternoon.
I'm also delighted to be joined by Harvey, who is an industry-renowned executive recruitment consultant, the founder of her eponymous company, which is an advisory services firm, spanning talent, strategy, and culture, and she advises world-class brands like Adidas, Amazon, Ralph Lauren, Tom Ford, and YNAB, to name a few. Hello, Karen. Thank you again for coming.
Hi, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And finally, but by no means least, Natalie Matalon, who is the Senior Director of Talent Acquisition at Farfetch. She oversees recruitment, recognition, and development at now one of the largest retailers in the world. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you for having me.
Over the next 40 to 45 minutes, we're going to discuss the shockwaves to the job market and then the changes to the recruitment process as a result of it becoming remote. And finally, we're going to talk about some values that are emerging, or crucially are emerging, we felt more strongly in the recruitment space as it pertains to diversity, inclusivity, and a variety of other things. We're then going to call on our community to ask any questions that they may have on how, so that we can try and share advice with them on any issues that they are facing themselves. But firstly, to kick things off, I wanted to get an idea from each of you as to how you see the current landscape, what immediately comes to mind when you think of the job market in 2021. And CaSandra, why don't we start with you, given that you're plugged into a membership of fashion designers across the United States?
All right. Thank you. That's a really good question. I think I see that there's a lot of social justice and DEI and technology efforts that are being accelerated in this job market. And so we're going to see a lot of, fashion companies really look to staff for those types of expertise, but we're also going to be looking at a lot of the companies looking to upskill and reskill their current labor force around these particular disciplines. So I see those as two of the main things happening, but there's some others, but we can expand on that later.
Karen, what are the themes that you think are the most critical to defining hiring strategies at the moment?
Well, thank you so much. And I can't let this opportunity go by without congratulating my old friend CaSandra for her appointment after 20 years at the CFDA. I think it's really just a wonderful milestone, CaSandra, on so many levels for American fashion, honestly, and for the industry at large, and always been a big fan. So really great to be here with you. And of course, Natalie as well. And the thing I would say to this is, of course, CaSandra is right. So there are a number of things sort of going on simultaneously that, the same way we see, a coronavirus, a pandemic side by side with the need to bolster economies and innovate. So we're really in this moment where both CEOs and talent are both challenged with, these kinds of things that we usually face sort of one at a time. We typically don't face them all at once. So I think the first theme, Cassandra, you're absolutely right. And that we have mandates that we're really excited to put into motion from the clients we work with. And in terms of, bringing people of color, bringing underrepresented talent into companies. And simultaneously, I think there's this need to, and I don't know the statistics, Robin, you would know far more than I do, but what we know is that since the pandemic hit, the adoption of, technology, a variety of digital strategies and, like curbside pickup. It doesn't just happen that we sort of drive up and we say, hey, can I have such and such, right? So this end-to-end nature of how companies have been able to not only survive, but some thrive is going to be very much at the forefront. So I think these are the two converging areas. So where are the people that can move forward our social responsibility? I would also say, of course, sustainability and realistic commitments in that way. And then who are the talents, whether emerging talents or more seasoned talents that can put in place the kinds of things that Farfetch, frankly, has been helping people with for a very long time. And I think that it's really incredible the things that we can learn from these pure play, real digital first, companies that are not just multi-branded, but that have been teaching us about how to integrate technology. So I think those are the three buckets.
Thank you, Karen. Natalie, you hire for what is not only a large organization in terms of scale, but a diverse organization in terms of function. Where have you seen the hirings or the forces that are impacting the job market today play out in terms of growing headcounts, or as Karen and Cassandra have both identified, the need for businesses of all types, perhaps less for Farfetch, to upskill when it comes to, really next generation e-commerce fulfillment that reflects the omni-channel expectations of consumers today?
No, I totally agree with what was said. I think the diversity and inclusion agenda combined with the pandemic have essentially leveled the playing field in terms of talent, and has allowed organizations to think much more broadly than ever before in terms of where they source and how they source. And there's a great deal of willingness to go with non-traditional profiles, whereas before it was more of the tried and true approach, which I think is incredibly powerful. There's also this incremental challenge now of the candidate experience and onboarding into the organization have never had a physical contact with one another. And how do you execute a process that conveys what the company stands for as part of the selection process and allows candidates to really explore the options that are available and get the same type of read that they would otherwise have gotten had they been in physical space?
When we think about, just before we talk about the characteristics of leadership, which Karen, I'm going to come to you initially for, but when we think about just purely the departments that benefit from this shift towards e-commerce and, marketing, certainly, although marketing budgets, I'm sure, have been cut, marketing to an extent becomes very, very important, especially when there's a shift in terms of the consumer dynamic with the retailer or the brand itself. Natalie, you're in, I think, the best position to answer as to, are any departments, being given headcounts that there is, real opportunity for people if they are in video or if they are in, UX?
Absolutely. So I think the trend towards data science and more the analytical approach to business continues, but the emphasis on engineering and platform as well as product is increasing exponentially as we need to build for much greater scale.
Just while Natalie reconnects.
To your point, marketing is also a key area now as we try to reach audiences that experiences. And finally, the personal.
Natalie, we're just.
And finally, the client experience, whether it's private client or concierge type of services, is also greatly increased in importance.
Thank you, Natalie. We just had a little bit of a problem with your connection during that, but I think I managed to capture that it was marketing, data science, analytics, products, and also this idea of very close relationships with clients, so clienteling and personalization, as it were. Just while we sort out Natalie's connection, Karen, perhaps you could share, how this has changed in the expectations. Karen and CaSandra, if you could share how this has changed expectations on leaders. Uncertainty is a word that we've heard a lot in 2020, and I think we'll continue to hear moving forward.
I mean, I think the funny thing is that we sort of operate in times that don't appear to be crises as if we have certainty about what's going to happen tomorrow, the next day, next year. It's like we could all sit here and I'd say, well, tell me what's going to happen next. We have no idea. Tell me what's going to happen next week. We have no idea. So I think part of this is, and this is, I think, incredibly important, is that there's this kind of veil, this kind of context that we operate in that we think is very predictable. And look, in some ways, we're all in the predictability business in one way or another. But I think to recognize that life is always uncertain. And then when we are struck with the kinds of events that have been one on top of the other, we realize the reality of that. So I would just say, yes, it's very uncertain, but it's always been uncertain. And I think the takeaway here is planning for the next whatever. Doesn't mean always be in hide under your desk mode for, whatever, but I think it does mean that the best leaders are those who don't sort of live in this. And I think in some ways, if I may say, our industry prior to probably 6-7 years ago, it has been very good at talking to itself. And I think that we must take lessons and really be better observers of culture, of what's happening around us, but also outside of us, right? So that we can really understand what's happening in the world outside of our industry. But I think we're really looking for people that are, one, just on a personal, like soft skill level, inherently resilient. And I think anybody looking for work right now, this is not a moment to do anything but sort of, bring up your greatest, which every human being has, your greatest kind of inherent ability to really step up to the moment. And that's what we're looking for in our leaders. But that's not enough, because we really need good operational, very strategic leaders that can couple that resilience with vision, but also the ability to operate and put better infrastructure, better technology, better platforms in motion for also how people work together in the future, which I know is, one of your questions, Robin. So I think that resiliency is first, the understanding that we actually never know what's around the corner. So being prepared, just in terms of, the companies that have been prepared over the years building technology platforms are the ones that ended up, I think, faring much better than those that had to scramble and were more sort of, traditionally oriented and had a lower percentage to their total in all digital commerce across all platforms, right? So I think that's just a lesson, like invest. And that means for those of you out there who are looking for work, these skills will be very badly needed, whether it's an emerging designer as a designer owning their own business as a part of the CFDA, or as, a company of scale. It's all kind of relative here. It's all big. For those running multi-billion-dollar companies, it's big. These needs. And for those running small companies, it feels equally big.
I want to pick up on the emergence of new hard and soft skills, but before we do that, CaSandra, I would love to hear your take on just leadership. You have a unique view on fashion leadership because the CFDA membership combined, as Karen was saying, eponymous, own brand, real designers of the moment, which have very small operational backup, and big businesses which have professional leaders all around the same table. So I'd love to hear your insight.
Right. Karen, that was just so wonderfully said. I don't know if I can say it better, but I would just like to add, I think some of the other traits that we should look for is humility. To be honest, leadership doesn't know everything, right? And so there needs to be active listening, and, it's just as important as leading. So I would say being humble, listening, and as Karen said, the industry is so dynamic. Although we think it's predictable, it's fixed, and we know what's going to happen next, we really don't. So being flexible and being adaptive to situations. And then also, in times of challenges like this, it's hard to know what to say to the people that you supervise and manage in your organization. And I think honesty and candor and just, being consistent in how you communicate, making sure that it's as fact-based as possible, and, being empathetic, knowing that this is not just a challenging time for the organization, but for the individuals that work within the organization, your consumer. It's difficult for everyone. And so being empathetic and really being consistent in your messaging is really important leadership qualities to have.
In addition to, sorry, Natalie, would you like to share anything on the soft skills of leadership before we move on to the harder skills?
I totally agree. I think thriving in ambiguity and the ability to lead others through change is so critical, especially given what we've gone through last year and are still going through this year. Creative problem solving and a growth mindset is also something that we're really emphasizing. And that's a little bit the ability to evolve and roll. More often than not, the job we hire you to do is not the job that you're doing 6 months on, because the market changes so much, and the ability to adapt to that is really critical, obviously together with internal support and training and development. And then finally, CaSandra, I totally agree. I think the element of being human and being authentic and connecting authentically with people, and recognizing when we don't know all of the answers, where we have to listen better, and when we need help in taking action and bringing everyone along on that journey is critical.
Something that the experience or the events of 2020 really emphasized was some missing expertise in the fashion industry. whilst we have some outliers, Farfetch, for example, that are very, very strong, we were lacking at a leadership level individuals that understood scaled products, that understood what consumer service at scale meant, what that, and that's clearly an area of high interest. I wondered, Karen, perhaps we were talking about this in our prep call, and you were saying that there's a sort of split in terms of, people really need, or there's a great desire for individuals with experience at consumer brands at scale in fashion, no matter where the positioning of that fashion company may be it retailer, luxury brand, or larger brand. And I wondered if you could give a bit of insight as to how that very hard skill is shifting, kind of how leadership roles are divided before we move on to the recruitment process.
Absolutely, thank you. But I also want to thank CaSandra for bringing up this crucial fact. None of us knows everything. Leaders do not know everything. And the great leaders actually do know that. So humility right now more than ever before, but it should begin and really continue in not just words, but in action and behavior. And on the hard skills, we were talking about a lot of things, but I would say, look, digital, first of all, is not a bucket. It's just not a bucket. So it's, and it's something that often has been sort of put in a bucket when we talk to clients about what they want and what they need. And so I think we have to really clarify today that the number one skill that has been overlooked in this industry is data, the understanding, the appreciation, the expertise in, and it's really consumer first. So the data doesn't mean anything if it's not about the consumer, but this embracing of consumers being in the center of the business. It's not just words, it's not just Instagram, it's not just marketing, it's not that. It's really understanding, actually, who are you selling to now? Who do you want to sell to? And that's not, just a gut feeling. That there is so much information that is out there. We're talking a lot right now about, how do you create loyalty? How do you retain consumers? This full funnel marketing approach has not been incorporated in many fashion companies at all that are not pure play, right? First. So I would just say, like, hard skills, embrace the consumer, not just in how you think about them or who you think they are, but learn about them. And there are people that mostly are outside of our industry but related. We look at companies, frankly, like Starbucks, who have been incredible at, creating, they're all the way down to personalization now. Many of the sort of large retail companies that are not necessarily fashion companies, but have these, it's a combination of things. And Natalie could tell you more, but it's having the ability and the technology, the software to get the analytics, but also the platforms to create engagement. And I think what it also requires is a further collapsing of silos inside businesses. So we talked a lot about my view that the centers of innovation that fashion brands started with a number of years ago really need to be integrated into companies. And I don't care what you call it. I don't care if it's chief digital officer, chief marketing officer, chief omni-channel officer. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that innovation should be inside everything we do. And innovation's a funny word, right? But it's everything. Look, again, you would have the statistics, but using 3D printing, and for 3D for prototyping, saves time, saves money, is more sustainable. Those kinds of technologies in design, looking at supply chain opportunities, but connecting them so that you can use the AI platforms that help you also predict what you make. So we have to find ways to innovate structures inside companies so that actually people are not just talking to one another, but learning and really using those learnings for speed in a good way. So we make less. And so we authentically also, connect with consumers. Did that hit what you were looking for?
It did. And it actually created a very natural segue into talking about the recruitment process itself in a little bit more detail and how that's changed, given that in a majority of geographies, it's still being done remote. And Natalie, you identified the challenge, which I've been through myself, of onboarding individuals when you yourself have never met them physically, and welcoming them into the company family, as it were. Natalie, when Farfetch has been a pure play, relatively innovative, an innovative business that has been seeking out tech and various other product talent for a long time, or perhaps before the scramble that other businesses may be in now. But beyond that, when you think about, everyone that you're employing across, that number in the thousands, what are the attributes or characteristics of talent today that you look for in your interview process that enable employees across a business to be as connected and as responsive and collaborative as Karen was just identifying as the modern business landscape requires? How do you identify those characteristics, and what are those characteristics that are appealing to employers?
Well, we really have three elements that we look for that combined, I think, make the ideal fit. The first is that it's critical that the candidates that we hire share the same values that Farfetch holds. And so we're very clear externally and internally, we really live the values and we communicate them consistently. So in the interview process, we will always ask those questions of, can you tell me about a time when you were human, where you did, where you had to solve a very difficult problem in collaboration with others? How did you do it? So we're really looking for not what you did, but how you go about doing things to make sure that it fits the values of the organization. Secondly, obviously, we assess whether or not you're good for the role today. But I would say more crucially, the most important thing is, would you be able to grow and evolve over time? And as I said earlier, the fast pace and the evolution of the industry is exciting, but it's also incredibly challenging. And we do want to heavily invest in the people that we hire and skill them up, but we need to ensure that they all have consistent attributes that allow them to grow. And that is having a growth mindset and having the ability to evolve into different things seamlessly, creative problem solving. So those individuals that are excited by the challenge and seek those opportunities and don't shy away from them. And as we mentioned earlier, thriving in change and ensuring that others come along on the journey with you, creating a roadmap and getting people excited and aligned. I think those are consistent. It doesn't really matter what level you're being hired as. These are attributes that you need to demonstrate in order to be able to grow and succeed and evolve over time.
CaSandra and Karen, did you want to add?
Absolutely. I think Natalie summed it up really well, and Karen also. I think what they're really identifying are analytical skills, being able to problem solve, be creative, be innovative. I think those again, technological skills will be important, and certainly very specific disciplines and data science and data scientists will be important. But I think the agility of the company will really hinge on those soft skills, those communication skills, those growth mindset skills, those planning skills, those problem solving, those being able to develop and sort of ideate. Those soft skills will be the indicator of growth and success.
100% right, CaSandra. But I think also, look, talk forever, and I will not, on this subject, but it is let's really recognize what a challenging time this is for anyone looking for work. It's always competitive, but it's incredibly hard. And I would just say for anyone, and I know Natalie, I can tell, we've not met before, but I know that I can tell that you sort of employ this kind of way of thinking every day, but it's very hard for people looking and, wanting to put their absolute best, excuse the, contrived expression, but foot forward. And because everyone is so busy, I think we sometimes forget that if you're only having a brief screen with a candidate, tell them that in advance, make sure that, especially because you're not in person, we're on Zoom. And so just for those hiring managers out there who are listening, this is a tough time for people. And so also be super careful about, just making sure that you're interviewing people you are genuinely interested in, because people will feel it as well. And I think be open for something to surprise you. And for those people right now, Zoom is not easy, but I've actually found it to be a real benefit. You do get more, let's say, absolute attention from the people you're speaking with. It is more one-on-one, and mostly people don't start taking calls, although, dear God, I'm a little guilty of that from time to time, but mostly, even if it's maybe a shorter meeting, you have somebody's attention. We were talking about this when we were prepping, but think about your frame, think about your lighting, because it also, fashion is a business of aesthetics. It is. And I know the sweats are amazing, and there's gorgeous sweats that we're all wearing out there, but think about, this is a business of aesthetics, which isn't just about what you're wearing. It's about the setting that you're trying your very best to put yourself in. So be conscious of that. And then also be prepared. Be prepared. Do your homework, do your research. Don't show up to any interview unprepared about who it is you're meeting, whether it's someone in my field or someone with Natalie, or if you're going to get advice from CaSandra, which I'm telling you, this woman is probably waking up to 1,000 emails and going to bed the same. Use her time well. Like, what's your question, right? It's just super important.
How would, perhaps all of you could share just some examples of people impressing in Zoom interviews with that preparation, or just some clear rules to think about. Obviously, be prepared is one of them, but we are talking about talent profiles, and by that I mean the applicants coming from more diverse backgrounds than ever before. We've already raised the fact that the industry is finally opening itself up to really accepting talent for talent's sake, talent as talent is. So and Zooms are strange, controlled environments and circumstances, even if they are very focused ones. So how can people show the soft skills we've just been talking about, perhaps explain their experience that's unusual to the hiring manager? Natalie, perhaps you could start.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really around refining your message and what you want to bring across and take away. It is less about what you have done in the past. It's more about how you will do things in the future, and being able to paint a picture and tell a story is really important. When we have physical contact, there are a lot more inputs that come into play when one is being assessed. And so this refinement is critical when it's just one-on-one and you're looking somebody in the eye and there's no other distraction. I think also making sure that you know what questions to ask, and ensuring that they're aligned with your values. As you think about which organizations you would want to be part of, understand what they stand for and make sure that this is something that you can align yourself with and you would feel at home with, and demonstrate how you fit into that environment. I think those two things combined are incredibly powerful and set candidates apart.
CaSandra, did you want to share some thoughts? And then I wanted to move on to some of the new values that the recruitment process.
Absolutely. I just want to agree with Natalie. I think being succinct in how you message yourself and your communication is very important. I also think that this is a very difficult time, and it's a very challenging way to interview and recruit candidates. However, I think this particular process is going to be here to stay, whether it's a hybrid version of it of some sort. So we all have to practice. And I think what I would suggest is taking some time before an interview to meet with a friend or a family member and sort of practice. Get in front of the camera, make sure the frame and the lighting is right, have them ask you questions, answer those questions back, put some questions to them. Like it's very much practice makes perfect. I'm sure it won't make absolutely perfect, but it certainly helps so that you're coming into the interview confident and comfortable, and again, ready, prepared. I think you just have to have a level of preparedness. So that would be my main suggestion to candidates.
Karen, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, Natalie said the perfect thing, storytelling, right? So the arc of your journey and have it down to 3-4 minutes, right? But being able to take people through, and not back to birth unless they ask you, but really to be able to sum up like where you've been, where you are now, and where you're going, or where you are now, where you've been, and where you want to go is very important, with both that element of how you think about things and what you've actually done and accomplished. And of course, CaSandra, it's great advice, right? So practice. And really get somebody to join you on Zoom, especially someone who might know something about the role that you're looking for, the company, and what they know and understand. And I cannot say enough about, there's so much online about absolutely anyone that you will be meeting with. Watch the videos, take the time. You can't always go to the stores. You can look at all their website, but I always say, like, being prepared always made me more at ease. I just don't like to wing it. I'm just one of those people, but you also have to be natural. So when you're prepared, you don't have to think about something along those lines. So
you haven't learned your script. And yeah, researching the person that you're meeting is crucial. And just before we move on, we've had a question from Rose Afshar in the audience, just asking what interview question has impressed you most. And I thought for our recent graduates and the emerging talent that are entering the industry that perhaps have less interview experience than others, when we say, make sure you have some questions to propose to the interviewer, what would you suggest are the strongest kind of questions? Does anyone have any immediate burning examples they want to share? CaSandra, go.
Well, I don't have a specific question, but I think in terms of types of questions, the more you ask companies about their mission, value, and purpose, and really understand that, the better it is. I mean, you will understand whether you align with that or want to align with that. The more you ask questions about leadership, the more you ask questions about, performance management and just how the company operates, the better it is. I think getting a full picture of the company through your research is great, but it's also when you get that opportunity to talk to someone who's actually living that experience within the company, it's good to ask those questions.
Yeah.
I agree. I would just add, it's companies do try to convey what their values are and what they stand for. They don't always do as good a job showing how they live those values. And I think asking those types of questions and probing on specific examples. I mean, to CaSandra's point, how would a diversity and inclusion agenda feed into the way that employees are treated and rewarded and recognized and developed, and whether or not the organization has communities that have a voice, and how is that voice used and listened to. Those types of questions suggest that you've done your homework, you did research, and you're really now just trying to refine your point of view as to whether or not this organization will be right for you. And you have to remember, interviews shouldn't be one-sided. You need to assess as much as you're being assessed. It's a partnership.
Just before we move on to the impact of the social justice movements and how, as the industry really grapples and finally gets round to fixing some diversity and inclusivity issues, or the diversity and inclusivity issue at its heart, how that can actually impact candidates, and how businesses should ensure that those candidates are being looked after properly. I do want to also just flag some feedback that, you know, as we've all identified, fashion is already a very competitive industry. These are extremely competitive times. Just to get to interview now is an achievement. And I wondered if there was any burning advice that we could share with just with any applicants that, you know, having made a number of applications, are struggling to get themselves in front of someone, whether there are other industries that we could suggest people can go and find some experience in, or whether there's analogous skills that they can bring in. I wondered if any of you have any advice. Karen, perhaps you can start.
I can start, and then I would love to hear what Natalie, like what works for her, because I think what people really want to know is, you know, how people, what people like Natalie look for. I would say, look, LinkedIn is an amazing tool. It's also, you just have to understand that all of us, I would say probably on Natalie's side, you know, our side, we get inundated with LinkedIn requests, and it's really hard, at least for me, to respond to everything. So, you know, it's also really important that you have your CV. Please don't just ask for a meeting and assume that person has to go to the next step and look at your profile. Like, be succinct in your message and what you're interested in doing, and so however you're reaching out. Also, let's not forget, networking is really important. So Business of Fashion gives really terrific, and I'm not just saying this, but opportunities for people to connect within the industry, with each other, as a community, to network, because I mean, this is networking, not nepotism. I mean, I'm really talking about a time when time is hard. People are working on so many things. So if you can participate in a way that you could connect with someone who can help you get an interview. I always say, look, you know, even my friends whose kids are graduating, you know, I can help them with a meeting. After that, it's up to them. So, and we all do that, I think, for each other. But please know that if it's LinkedIn or however you're writing, lower your expectations on speed and try not to, you know, be too pushy in some ways. I just want to say I know how hard it is, but give people a little bit of time. Know that if a CV comes in, it might get passed to the right person. But ask that. Look, if I'm writing to you, Natalie, and you're not the right person for this particular role, can you please ask someone, or can you point me in the right direction? It's just a relief for somebody, right? Mm-hmm. Inside, they're just like, thank you. So I think there's that. And then was it time to go to the social justice area?
No, that you're making a good point here, because I think there are different avenues now in which people are submitting their resumes. It's not just sort of on LinkedIn. So I think you have to be a bit creative and inventive. I've seen some very interesting YouTube cover letters. Yeah. I've seen some Instagram posts. Like, sometimes you have to do the unexpected
Thank you
to
for
get
that.
to get
She's
to
so
get their
right.
to get their attention. You can't go sometimes through the traditional pipeline or avenue. So I would
100%.
say, if there was any time to take a different approach and be creative, now would be that time. Take the risk a little bit, but I think Karen pointed out something very important. I'm sure Natalie and other people in her career are just very busy. They're getting a lot of communication. I know they want to get back to everyone and can't. I know they have automated messages sometimes that answer you back. I think you have to be patient. I think you have to lower your expectations a little bit. And I think sometimes maybe, if you've reached out a couple of times and you haven't heard anything back, it's okay to move on to the next opportunity that may be out there. It's time to extend the search. But certainly don't take it personal, and realize that there are many factors that impact the response that you get. So I just put that out there.
I totally agree. I would just add also that this is a lifelong journey, and Karen made a really good point. It's about the communities that you form, whether you join social or professional or academic organizations. Leverage the communities around you. There's the traditional path of applying for a role, and that is fine, and you should try to do that. But also, almost more importantly, reaching out to people within the organization, not within the talent team, but people that are actually doing the job. Ideally, getting a secondary or third connection from LinkedIn would be amazing, or through the communities that you know. But having conversation not about, I need a job today, but about, I'd love to learn more about what you do and how you do it, and how can I prepare myself better to be able to do what you do in the future. When you reach out to someone with that sort of topical approach, they're much more open to having a conversation, because if they don't have a job for you today, and you said, I'm looking for a job, they will immediately say, well, I don't have one. But if you build that relationship, you make that connection, you learn along the way. Ideally, at the end of the call, they might say, you know what, I might not have anything, but I know someone that you would be perfect for, and they'll introduce you to the next person over. But even if that doesn't happen, it's a lifelong investment, and it's a connection that you've made that you'll be able to use in the future.
Before we move on to the impact of the social justice movements of 2020 on recruitment at a whole, I want to start kind of laser focused on the candidate. Now, we're all aware that most, if not all, institutions in the industry have work to do when it comes to the diversity of their workforces and the inclusivity of their culture. In recent months, I would say, rather than years, the industry has really started to try and take some of those steps forward, or certain players within the industry there seems to have been a sea change in how seriously this is being taken, thank goodness, finally. But as a result, the recruitment, there are now, as you were mentioning earlier, Karen, you are being instructed to find talent that comes from a specific demographic background, etc. And just to start this conversation, I want to start with what candidates should and can expect their prospective employer to provide them in terms of information about where that employer might be on their diversity inclusivity journey, and where the candidate, if they are from a typically underrepresented demographic within the industry, what they can expect their appointment to mean within the company that they're joining, and whether. So Natalie, perhaps we could start with you.
So I think that there's two elements at play here. The first is the organizations that have really taken this to heart have published their perspective. They have a stand, they've taken action, or they have plans, and they're in process of implementing those plans. Those would normally be put on the external website. So I would look for that first. If they don't have it, that is a fairly good indication that they're pretty early on the journey, if on the journey at all. And then secondly, I think that asking questions around how, once somebody is hired, how are they developed and recognized and supported, whether or not the organization has communities, diverse communities, and how they are provided a platform to amplify their voices and how those voices are being heard. those are the types of questions that you need to ask and the type of information you need to obtain in order to ensure that it's not just lip service, it's an organization that's actually living the values.
CaSandra, Karen, is there anything that you wanted to add on that element before we talk about some broader topics?
I mean, I would turn it over to CaSandra, then yes, I would have something to add, I'm sure, after that. CaSandra.
Sorry, I was on mute. Apologies. So I think I would say for companies, I think it's important that they understand the recruitment process is just not searching for the candidate, but I think the experience that the candidate has throughout the process is really going to reflect what the social impact, social diversity, equity policies are. So it's in the types of questions that you ask those candidates. It's in how you formulate the job description, what are the sort of attributes that you put out there that you're looking for the job. So I think, you know, in terms of the recruitment process itself, you have to make sure to incorporate that sort of DEI umbrella throughout the process. So it's the job description, the looking for the candidate, how you interview them so they feel like they're going to be welcomed and belonging, how you onboard them is the other process that is so imperative, so that they do feel like they can succeed when they get there. So I would just highlight that as important.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, thank you for that. And I couldn't underscore that enough. Listen, we have so much work to do. Let's be clear. And I think that the events of the summer were those that will forever remind those of us who are not people of color, who to have really also go on that personal journey of, you know, I may not think that I am, you know, biased. I may not think that I, you know, I am racist. And to understand that for myself, I can't speak for anyone else. It's not about what we think. It's sort of about what we think with. And for those of us who've been on this journey as Caucasian, as white people, it's for me to understand that systemic bias is in my DNA. I did not choose it, but it is in my DNA. And so by recognizing that, it's really about being able to choose and choose to not operate from that place, and to know, of course, what my intentions are, but intentions actually are not enough. What do our actions look like? And so we can't stress enough how important it is to never slip backwards. And Natalie is so right. You will know by what a company puts on their website, what their journey is, where they've been, what their commitments are. And realistic timelines, I think, are important, whether we're talking about these issues or other issues around change. It's not going to be done overnight, but we're in a hurry. We have to change our mindset. And the first thing I would say is we have to be very careful about this word culture fit. And I would say that I am probably, as the CEO of my own firm, probably the most guilty of saying, look, you know, we've always really focused on understanding a company's culture and what that fit is, but let's be very clear that, and there's a CEO who will go unmentioned, but he's really brilliant, who I've worked with, who now has his company saying culture add, because sometimes culture fit is exclusive. When we're trying to be inclusive, we need to be inclusive, So redefine, I think, what that means. I would just say inside companies, and we need culture add. And I think also it's not a time to be performative. And it's okay to recognize within yourself that you're on a journey, wherever it is. But most importantly, it's not about me. It's not about Natalie. It's about bringing underrepresented talent as quickly as we can into our organization so we can stand up people of color or LGBTQ, whatever it is, as leaders, and stand them up as leaders, and learn from them while they're, learning from us. And that's just, it's something that those of us who are doing this work, it's not easy, by the way, because it sort of goes back to education. We have to go into these communities where people of color may not know how to cross the bridge into our industry, right? How do we, people who do what I do, it is imperative to go outside the industry to find the talent that we need, because we haven't grown enough talent here, I would say.
In addition to expanding talent sourcing pools, and I know a lot of leaders in the space have really worked hard to identify whether that is scholarships with traditionally Black universities, whether that is posting in unusual job boards, the opportunity that remote working has done to enable people with slightly more complex daily lives to enter the workforce. But just while we're talking about this concept of value add, how have you come across any excellence in your experience where that value add has been, where the way that value has been added to a company has been set up in a manner that means it is not just through marketing or diversity or anything else that traditionally underrepresented demographics have authority in, and actually is a value add to an organization across every aspect of its function or seniority? Have you seen anything in practice that has enabled that, CaSandra or Natalie or Karen?
CaSandra, Natalie, any of you?
I can say, I'm not sure it's quite answering your question, but I think for us, it's recognizing that unconscious bias and the fact that it is unconscious, and therefore it's very difficult for us to know when we're doing it. And then setting up processes to de-bias every element of our operations, whether it's people operations in the way that we select and assess and onboard and reward and recognize, but also in how we think about the vendors that we choose to use and the products that we put out and the messaging that we convey through all of that together. It's both on the commercial side as well as internally. And I think that permeates all roles, all levels. It really is the only way this inclusivity can become a heartbeat within the organization to move it forward.
I would totally agree with you, Natalie. And I would just say, I don't want to name any specific company, but I think the CFDA's work in this space can offer some light into that. And, we've spent the past couple of months working with PVH and McKinsey to really execute a talent development and discovery survey to really hear from those in the industry and also from groups outside of the industry about what the industry could be doing or should be doing to help their entry be a little smoother. I think we've found out a couple of things, which is really centered around awareness and access. Often people are not aware of the jobs that exist in this industry. And I think, one of our solves for that was to, we partnered with Creatively to sort of create this talent directory where it's going to provide awareness and access. It's going to let people know what jobs exist in the industry and give them the opportunity to be highlighted as talent that Natalie and other people of her ilk can really tap into and interview and bring on board should there be that sort of value add. I think we need to start creating these systems that really quickly integrate those of us of color into the industry. But before we do that, I think the companies that are successful are those that take the time to do the internal work.
Yes.
Because all of that is external, and that's great, but I think there is some internal work that companies have to do to make sure that when they bring people in, that it's not only just success, profitability for the company, but it's also sort of success in terms of the culture and the community and everyone who's involved. And I think Karen pointed out something that's so important, that she basically had a level of self-awareness to say, I may carry some biases, and that's just the institution of our Americas and other countries and how we were educated and sort of grown up. And so, because I know that exists, I'm doing everything that I can to remain aware, but to also regulate that, to put things in place and in measure so that I can prevent those biases from trickling into the process of recruitment. And I think companies who do that, we know that there's workshops going on, we know that there's anti-racism training that's happening, but if companies are not doing that internal work, then the latter part of this will be difficult. So I think the companies that are going to succeed and the ones that we're going to see be successful, when we start looking into them more deeply, we're going to find that they did the internal work first.
I mean, just Robin, I can't emphasize that enough, because that is about culture. Culture has to be transformed. And, I can't speak for every company out there, but I think that is the training, that is the work that needs to go on inside. And I think, honestly, most people are hungry for it, and they want to make change. They want to really contribute. So I believe there's all the best intentions. I really do. But the work is bringing that in. And I'm, of course, I work with PVH, but also I'm very impressed with McKinsey, actually, and what they've been doing around this. There's so many things I think that they do really well, but I've been sort of watching them and really looking at the work they're doing around this. So I think it's fascinating, but this is exciting. This is exciting. It's not a time to beat ourselves up. It's not a time to, it's really an incredible opportunity that through our work, actually, we can become more self-aware. We can build greater foundations, a human foundation inside our companies, which, by the way, will create greater profits and will, be so inspiring for people to be a part of that change. And, if we saw nothing else this summer, we could see unification around that, honestly, that desire. And so I would just say, there's some levity here too, because it's on. This is game on.
Couldn't agree more.
Agreed.
I think that's a perfect sentiment to end on, really. I'm sorry that we didn't have time to answer as many questions as we hoped to. There was a small technical error on my behalf, so apologies for that. But of those that we pre-selected, I think the conversation did tackle most of those issues. Karen, CaSandra, Natalie, thank you so much for spending your time and sharing your insight and expertise with our community. I've certainly learned a lot today and found it a very inspiring talk. So thank you all very much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Natalie.
Pleasure.
Great to see you again, CaSandra. Talk soon. Bye. Thank you, Robin. Thank you.
BoF Careers has actually written a series of white papers, one on how to create a more inclusive recruitment process, another on the expectations of young talent in the industry, where they certainly expect that this internal work be completed. So please do check them out if that can be of any help to any hiring managers. But thank you all very much for joining us, and we will see you again soon. So thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.